Hello, and welcome once again to Lehto's Law. I'm Steve Lehto, attorney at law in the state of Michigan. I've been practicing now for 25 years in the fields of consumer protection and lemon law. In fact, my 25th anniversary passed this past week, so I can now say officially it's been 25 years practicing law in the state of Michigan. I also write about this stuff for places like roadandtrack.com. And another cool thing, today is the first episode of Season 3 of Lehto's Law. I've actually completed 2 full years of podcasts. Now, I don't have quite 2 full years on YouTube, but those of you who've been following me with the audio podcast, I did 52 the first year, 52 the second year, and today is the first episode of year 3. So, in honor of the number 3, I can't believe I haven't done this topic yet. Today we're going to talk about why there is no 3-day return period on a car purchase. One of the biggest myths I encounter all the time. In fact, I got a phone call about this yesterday. People call me and they believe there's a 3-day right to return a car that they've bought that they don't like. And there is no such right to return something in most cases in most states, and especially not in Michigan. So we'll talk about this. I've written about this before, but I've never done a podcast on it. So we're talking about the mythical 3-day right to return, or the 3-day cooling off period that does not exist in the automobile world, okay? So here is how I like to explain it best. I have a voicemail system at my office. If you call my number right now, today is not a Monday through Friday 9 to 5. I'm taping my podcast, so it's a weekend. And so if you were to call my office right now, my phone would ring. If I'm here, I might answer it, but if I'm not here, I might not answer it. So you leave a voicemail. I routinely come into my office on Monday and I see the little red light lit, and I look at it and I know there's a very good chance the message is going to go like this. Hi, I'm calling you because I just bought a car on Friday. It blew up on me. Now, today is Sunday, and in the message it's Sunday. And so let's see now, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and I can hear them thinking out loud, and they'll say, I think I need to return the car by Monday, but I don't know how to do that, and they're closed today. I can't return it today because it's Sunday. So how do I return the car on Monday to get my money back? So I call the person back and I say, you bought the car used from a dealer as is in Michigan, yeah? And they say, yeah. And I say, did they tell you you've got 3 days to return it? I mean, I've heard of wacky, sales things. We can't beat your best deal. We'll give you 5 pounds of coffee. Some of my really, really old listeners in Michigan will know what I'm talking about there. Ollie Fredder. Remember him? Fredder's Appliance. But anyways, I go, well, did they tell you got 3 days? And they say, well, no, but I just bought it 3 days ago and I've got the 3-day thing. I go, what 3-day thing? And see, here's the problem as an attorney. I can't come right out and say, oh, you want to talk about the 3-day right to return? Because then they'll go, yes. And then I have to say, well, there's no such thing. And they'll say, well, yeah, but you just mentioned it. See, I can't mention it because I don't want people to even start with the thought that it might be real. It's not real. So I kind of have to play stupid and go, what are you talking about? And they say, well, don't I have the right to return something within 3 days if I've changed my mind, for any reason? And that's one of the things about this law is you ask somebody what the law is and it changes. And it's wishful thinking. People wish they had a 3-day right to return anything for any reason. But I ask them, I say, well, tell me, what do you think the law is? And of course, many people are thinking to themselves at that point, wait, you're an attorney. Why don't you tell me what the law is? But it's a little game I play. So I say, tell me what the law is. And they say, well, I thought I have the right to return anything I want within 3 days. Isn't that the law? And I say, no, actually, that's not the law. And then people say, well, why have I heard that? Now, why you've heard something that's not true is actually something that a sociology professor would more likely be interested in. There's the guy, Jean-Harold Brunvand, who writes the books about urban myths, But it's a myth. There is no 3-day right to return anything for any reason. And again, every time I've written about this, and I've mentioned it a few times in different columns I've written, people get angry and they tell me that, dude, you don't know what you're talking about. You're insane. And I'm an attorney. I kind of know what I'm talking about, but explain to me why. And they say, well, no, because it's true. And they just say that. And I say, well, if you can find me the law, show it to me. And no one ever can because there is no law. So let's back up. First of all, the idea that you can return anything for any reason within 3 days is a myth. There's no such law anywhere in the Western civilization, okay? But you have to listen carefully to what I'm saying. That is the 3-day right to return anything for any reason. Now, here is the problem. There are some very specific, what they call cooling off rules, where you can return something or cancel a contract under extremely specific circumstances, and a couple of them have 3 days, okay? And so what happens is people know that there's something out there, and they know there's something they'd like to be out there, and in their mind they mash them together and they come up with the fantasy that they can return anything within 3 days. So, to give you an example where you might have seen a cooling off period notice, and by the way, you're almost always notified of these things. If you've ever bought a house, you sign a pile of papers that actually is probably the same weight as your house. Okay, I'm talking about a mountain of paper. And as you're flipping through these papers, signing, and you're not reading any of it because, quite frankly, no one's got that kind of time. Buried in there are several notices, and it's not uncommon that there's one or two that actually say, federal law mandates that the lender must give you a certain period of time within which you can change your mind on this. And I forgot exactly what the terms are and so on. But there are some federal notices that are given to you by federal mandate, as long as you're borrowing money from a federally licensed lending facility, which you almost always are when you're buying a house. And so that notice will say, within 3 days, if you change your mind on this, you can change your mind, but you must take the following steps. And it's spelled out for you. But the best example in Michigan, and many states have got this, but Michigan's got a thing called the Home Solicitation Sales Act. And I actually was just talking about this with somebody who used to sell encyclopedias for a living. And he mentioned this. And I said, I'm doing a podcast on this today. What are the odds? And if a salesman in Michigan comes and knocks on your door, they knock on your door. There, the sound effects now. The show is now multimedia with sound effects. Salesman comes and knocks on your door. And you open up the door and he says, hi, I'm here to sell you a vacuum cleaner or Amway. By the way, if it's an Amway person, run. Even though it's your own house, run. Or encyclopedias, okay? So a salesman comes into your living room, or a salesperson comes into your living room and sits down and pulls out samples and pulls out catalogs and shows you stuff in your own living room. And this is extremely important to understand. It's called the Home Solicitation Sales Act. That is a home solicitor. Someone came into your home to sell you something. It could be an apartment you're renting. It could be a house you live in. Okay? If you're homeless, I suppose if they visited you at your shopping cart. Okay? The point is that they come into your domain and they're selling you something there. The law and the legislators recognized years ago that when someone comes into your house, it creates a really weird situation. Because if you went to a vacuum cleaner store and you're walking around looking at vacuum cleaners, and I understand that there really aren't vacuum cleaner stores anymore, or if there are, they're verging on going extinct. The last vacuum cleaner I bought from a Target. Okay. But you can buy one from Walmart if you want, Kmart, if they're still around. They might not be by the time this thing airs. But you go to a vacuum cleaner store and a salesman comes up and starts leaning on you to buy a vacuum cleaner. You can get up and walk out, okay? I mean, again, George Costanza, it's time to walk, okay? The problem you've got when they come into your own living room, despite the fact I told you to run when Amway shows up, is you actually can't get up and walk out because the guy's still in your living room, okay? And so if you say, sir, I need you to leave, he's going to pull the old, well, wait a second. Are you telling me that you don't want a great deal on the vacuum cleaner that was ranked #1 by Vacuum Cleaner World magazine? What? Hang on a second. I don't think you, and short of getting a crowbar, either to pry the guy off your couch or to whack him over the head with, which I wouldn't recommend as your attorney, it's difficult sometimes to get these people out of your house, okay? So, when the home solicitor shows up and leans on you hard to buy something, the law recognizes that some people will actually buy something and then immediately regret it. So under Michigan law, if a home solicitor comes into your house and sells you something, they're required to not only allow you to cancel the sale for any reason within 3 days, they've got to give you a notice that says, by the way, you have the right to cancel this sale within 3 days and any reason at all. You can just say, I just changed my mind. 3 days, change your mind, and they have to tell you how to do it. Here's who to contact, here's what to tell. Believe it or not, I've spoken to people who said, hey, somebody came into my house and sold me something crazy. A warehouse club membership or something like that. And they didn't include that notice. And so 3 days passed, and now I'm talking to an attorney a week later. What can I do? Believe it or not, if they didn't give you the notice, the 3-day period doesn't start to run. You have the right to cancel that within 3 days of being notified of your right to cancel. So you actually have forever to cancel that until they give you the notice. However, the point is that that's a very specific circumstance within which you have the right to cancel for any reason. That's the Home Solicitation Sales Act, and it only applies in Michigan if it's a person who comes into your home to sell you something, or in an extremely rare circumstance when you're someplace other than the business's primary place of business. And the example I like to give people is I once had a client who bought a hot tub at a county fair. And the law specifically says that if you're at some unusual place where you weren't expecting to encounter a salesperson and you encounter one and you wind up buying something, again, you've got the right to cancel that sale. Now, I'll tell you, I've seen car dealers set up car sales at county fairs and other places like that. And I've also known that quite often when they get you to buy the car at that location, they'll often say, by the way, come back to the dealership to do the paperwork. Because they've been advised by their attorneys, don't do the paperwork out at the county fair, because if you do, that person's got 3 days to cancel the sale. So the 3-day right to return under the Home Solicitation Sales Act is a real thing. But it does not apply to cars sold at car dealerships in Michigan. Now, when I posted my article and I said you don't have this unqualified right to return or cancel any contract within 3 days, I had several people say, well, you're wrong because California's got one. California's got one. And I had so many people tell me that I thought, wow, I went to law school in California. Something changed in the 25 years I've been practicing law. So I said, okay, I'll look into this. California actually did come up with something that's similar to this, but it's very, very specific, and I've never heard of anybody who did it. But in California, if you buy a used car from a used car dealer, not an individual, but a used car dealer, they're required, if the car costs, I think, less than $30,000 or $40,000, they're required to offer you the right to purchase from them. It's like an insurance policy, where you will have the right to return the car for 2 days, not 3 days, 2 days. But you have to buy it from them. They're allowed to charge you for this. So they charge you for the right to return the car within 2 days. And if you do return the car within 2 days, they can charge you a restocking fee. So you got to pay for it in the first place, which no one ever does. And then you got to pay for the restocking fee, which, again, I've never heard of anybody who did it. I suppose people probably have, but the point is that it's not free. You have to pay for it in advance, and then you have to pay for it if you invoke it, and it's only 2 days, not 3. So for all the people who said, Steve, you're wrong, California's got a 3-day right to return for any reason, right to cancel any contract law, they don't. It's a right you've got if you buy it and pay for it for 2 days on some used cars when purchased from a dealership. So the 3-day right to return is such a widespread myth. The Federal Trade Commission has actually issued opinions on this. Look up Federal Trade Commission and 3-day rule, and you'll find out that they specifically say, yeah, there are some cooling off periods, but they don't apply to automobile sales. They don't. They simply don't. But people still believe it. Okay, so despite shows like this, columns that write, the Federal Trade Commission, people are going to believe what they want to believe because they wish there was such a thing. So when people call me and they often say, well, Steve, there's got to be this law, I've heard about it. I always say, well, can you show me the law? I've got law books. Again, if you're watching the podcast, the blue books behind me, right below the Daytona and the Tucker, those are Michigan's laws. That's all of them. Every Michigan law is in there. There's no such law like that in there. But I also say, by the way, if you think this law exists, would it apply to, for instance, You go into a restaurant and you order a dinner. And the dinner comes and you look at it and you go, I've changed my mind. I want my money back. Do you think you've got the right to just cancel the contract over the meal? And people say, well, of course not. I say, what do you mean, of course not? If you have the right to cancel any contract, the contract you have with the restaurant that provides you the meal, can't you just cancel that for any reason? And they say, well, no, it wouldn't apply to that. And I'm always amazed at how people understand the nuances of this law that doesn't exist. And I say, okay, fine. You go to a garage sale and you buy a lamp. And you take the lamp home and you look at it and go, I put it there and it doesn't look right. Put it there and it doesn't look right. And then my wife said, why'd you buy that ugly lamp? And I said, well, I'm going to take it back. You take it back to the garage sale. The garage sale's closed now, but the people still have their house. So you go and knock on the door. You go, I want my money back in the lamp. And they go, why? And you go, change my mind. And now most people would say, well, you can't return things to a garage sale. And I would say to the people who call me, I say, yeah, but if you return it within 3 days, don't you get your money back? They say, well, of course, it wouldn't apply to that either. So people often know the nuances and finer points of this law, despite the fact the law doesn't exist. And my point really is this, that people know deep down the law doesn't exist. They wish it did. But when they start realizing, well, it would only apply to the situation I want it to, but it wouldn't apply to this, it wouldn't apply to that, it wouldn't apply to that. Federal Trade Commission says it's not real. Steve Lehto says it's not real. It's not real, okay? So generally speaking, when you do have the right to return something under a period of law, whether 2 days in California or 3 days in a federal statute or 3 days under the Home Solicitation Sales Act, you'll be notified of it, okay? Generally speaking, you will be notified of it. So my friend who sold the encyclopedias told me, he said, yeah, he goes, we selling the encyclopedias. Think about selling encyclopedias for a living. And we give them the notice saying you've got the right to cancel this sale after 3 days. And he goes, and unfortunately, a lot of them did. People said, well, yeah, I spent that much money on a pile of books, And but he said that. He goes, we gave them the notice. And that's because it was a big encyclopedia company you've heard of. And their legal department said, yeah, you've got to provide this notice. And in Michigan, it says 3 days. You got 3 days. So, you get that notice. So if you're involved in purchasing anything and you don't get a notice of your right to return, you probably haven't got one. In fact, most car dealers I've seen now on their purchase agreements or on the lender's own documents, I've seen where it'll actually say there is no cooling off period. But I've actually met people who said, well, what does that mean? And I say, well, the cooling off period is a reference to the 3-day rule. And they go, why doesn't it say that? So the point is that even now the dealers are telling people you haven't got this right because apparently so many people are calling them before they're calling me. So again, there is no 3-day return period on a car purchase. There's no such right. You haven't got such a right. So when you're buying the car, don't think, hey, if it doesn't work out, I can always return it, because you can't. There is no 3-day return period on a car purchase. That's going to wrap up this episode, my first of Season 3, Lehto's Law. Questions, comments, as always, shoot them my way at my website, lehtoslaw.com, LEHTOSLAW.com. I'm on Twitter at Steve Lehto, at STEVELEHTO. And this show's on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Podbean, Google Play, and YouTube. Thanks for watching and listening. Bye-bye.